Thank you for tuning in to The Voice of Adventure. Today we will be rejoining the Iceman and the Traveler in a frozen reunion. After living for years in a kingdom he accidentally froze, the Iceman meets a traveler who came to explore this frozen kingdom. After hearing the story of how the kingdom was frozen, the traveler told his own tale in hopes of helping the Iceman who was trapped in his own guilt. Now that the traveler's story has ended, it is time to see what is next for the Iceman and the Traveler. The Iceman sat back in his chair, processing the story he had just heard about a man named Thaddeus in the Undying Lands. The Traveler connected his story with what happened to me. But where is the connection? The Iceman thought. The Traveler huddled next to a small fire, a couple of blankets wrapped tightly around his body. He clutched a small bowl that contained freshly made soup. He was doing everything he could not to shiver in the frozen castle. Silence filled the room as if empowered by the ice that covered every square inch of this place. Neither one spoke for a long time, the Traveler because he was too cold to speak, while the Iceman still pondered the meaning of the Traveler's story. Eventually the Traveler spoke, hoping to warm himself up in the process.
I see you're deep in thought. Was my childhood tale that eye-opening for you?
The Iceman shifted uncomfortably in his chair before responding. I enjoyed the story, but I'm failing to see how it connects to me. You had said that my life story about freezing this kingdom reminded you of the story of the Undying Lands, so I assumed your story would connect. But no matter how long I ponder, I see no connection.
Interesting. I thought the connection was clear, but no matter. I can explain to you my thoughts on this.
The Traveler drew closer to the fire, as the night had come and this frozen castle felt as cold as it was empty.
My story spoke of a man named Thaddeus, who found himself all alone in a new world. He journeyed aimlessly, having no one to help direct him, until he stumbled upon a creature that helped guide him to where he needed to go.
The man paused for a second, stroking the fire.
And this is the same story you are currently in. After you accidentally froze this kingdom, you found yourself alone with no destination. You blame yourself for what happened, when you only reacted to how the king treated you. You didn't even know the extent of your powers before you were pushed to the edge. And now you have stumbled upon me, a man who can lead you where you need to go.
The Iceman leaned forward, raising a hand to his chin. He contemplated the words his Traveler had said. Could what this man said be true? Is the king to blame for freezing the kingdom? Silence filled the room again, only interrupted by the occasional crackling of fire. Tears slowly formed in the Iceman's eyes as he started to accept that he was not to blame for freezing the country. It may have been his power that had done it, but he didn't do it by choice. The greedy king pushed him to the edge, and that is what froze the kingdom. It wasn't him. It was the king who did this. As the tears fell, they turned to ice, shattering as they hit the ground. The Iceman put his hands over his face, slowly allowing himself to be free from the guilt he carried all these years. For a few long minutes, he stayed there, feeling the heavy burden fall off his shoulders. For the first time in forever, he felt light and free. He relaxed back to his chair when he started hearing whispering voices. They were hard to make out, but these voices were calling out to him, inviting him somewhere. The Traveler, who was now so close to the fire that any rising ember could set him ablaze, watched as the Iceman's stress and guilt left. Seeing the bit of confusion on the Iceman's face, the Traveler said,
I see you hear the voices now, too.
The Iceman looked up, surprised.
I started hearing them as I explored this land. The ice that covers everything helps the voices spread to the edges of this frozen kingdom. As I explored, I found the voices grew louder the closer I came to this old capital. But I realized the voices didn't originate here. They came from farther north.
The traveler somehow inched even closer to the fire without getting burned, then continued.
I knew the voices were calling out to someone, but the longer I explored the land, the more I doubted anyone was here to listen. But then I met you, and I finally understood that they were calling out to you. Could the voices have been calling out to me this whole time?
The Iceman thought, before addressing the traveler.
I've only just started hearing these voices, but they were giving me no directions. All they say is, come home. But where is this home I am to return to? Why don't these voices tell me which direction to head? I don't have that answer, but I know the voices are coming from the north. So in the morning we can start our journey and follow the sound of the voices. But it's getting late, and I journeyed a long way today.
The traveler wrapped himself up tight in his blanket and laid near the fire. With too much on his mind to find sleep, the Iceman strolled outside under the moonlight. The air was bitterly cold, but the Iceman hardly noticed. He liked looking over the frozen city, watching the moon's light reflect off the ice-covered city. For years he had lived alone in this castle, and now it was all changing so quickly. Just a few hours after meeting this traveler, he began hearing the voices. And now in the morning, he was going to leave everything he knew to find his home. But was the place the voices were calling from his actual home? Or is this frozen kingdom his home? All this time he thought this was where he had to stay. Even though no one was left in his kingdom, he thought he needed to stay here to atone for the countless lives he ended. But could he have atoned long enough? Could he allow himself to be free and leave this place behind? Could he actually leave this place behind after everything he'd done?
It wasn't me,
he reminded himself.
The king forced me to freeze everything.
He stood there, watching over the city all night. The moon slowly walked its way across the sky, making room for the morning light. As the sun rose, golden light spread across the city, reflecting off the frozen buildings. The Iceman smiled at the beautiful landscape of this lonely town. As he watched the sun rise, still unsure if he could leave his sin behind, the traveler appeared behind him.
Are you getting one last look at the city?
Yeah, the Iceman said, feeling uncertain.
This has been my home for a long while. Not an easy place to leave. I understand. It's hard to leave the place you call home.
The traveler said, not completely understanding what was keeping the Iceman here. With a long sigh, the Iceman turned to the traveler. Forcing a smile, he said,
We better get going. The voices are probably much further away than we think.
The traveler nodded, and they set off together. They were quiet as they traveled, focusing on the sound of the voices to guide them. Slowly they continued north as the sun shone overhead, then began falling on their left. By this point, the voices sounded like they were speaking from every direction. Whether the voices were resounding through the valley or just in their heads, the traveler and the Iceman couldn't tell. They sat and rested from their long journey in a clearing at the base of the Store Mountains. The traveler kept glancing around, trying to hone in on the voices. But no matter how many times he turned his head, closed his eyes, or concentrated, he could not pinpoint their origin. Feeling defeated, he leaned his head against a tree.
These voices are starting to annoy me. Even though I've been hearing them for months, something about being so close to the source, but not knowing which way to go, has become quite irritating. They have also grown louder, making it impossible to follow them.
He let out a deep sigh.
Without some direction, it will take us years to search this valley and these mountains.
He looked over at the Iceman, who had remained silent since they sat down.
Are they speaking to you any clearer?
The Iceman didn't respond for a long minute. Walking back to these mountains with the traveler helped him put some pieces together. As he already knew, these voices were calling out to him. But the question was, who were they, and why specifically him? Through the long journey, he found himself drawn to the Store Mountains, which were the same mountains he had come from. Although he couldn't pinpoint where the voices were coming from, he had a feeling that he would find the answer if he got back to the same cave he woke up in. But did he remember the way? After a long silence, the traveler repeated the question. Are they speaking to you any clearer than they are to me? Because with nothing to go on, we will have to choose a direction and just walk until the voices change. No, I'm not hearing anything more than you are, the Iceman replied. But I think I know where to go. Follow me. Without another word, the Iceman stood up and began to navigate his way up the mountains. Surprisingly, even after years, he knew the path to take. They hiked the mountain for a few hours in total silence. The only sound was the strong winds that threatened to throw them off the mountain. Before long, the Iceman found the cave he had walked out of a few years ago. Small streams of light shone in the front entrance, dimly lighting what looked like a small room. On the far wall, a large wall of ice stood from floor to ceiling, blanketing the wall in a semi-transparent blue. Smaller sections jutted out, creating what looked like pillars holding up the ceiling. The traveler stepped into the mouth of the cave and started to shiver from the sudden cold. Even with the strong mountain wind outside, this room was significantly colder. The ice cooled this room, eliminating all sources of heat. He looked at the pillars of ice and thought he saw shadows moving in them. He looked back to the Iceman, wondering how he knew about this place. Inside the room, the voices were louder, as if they were having a shouting match right next to him. But the traveler was still unsure if these voices were coming from around him or just in his head. He slowly walked around and studied the small cave. Walking up to the ice wall, the traveler carefully put his hand on one of the pillars. Unsurprisingly, the ice was ridiculously cold to the touch. But suddenly, a shadow appeared directly in front of him, only to disappear a second later. Did you see that? The traveler screamed, quickly turning to the Iceman, who didn't acknowledge the question. The traveler yelled again, hoping to get the Iceman's attention. For a split second, there was a shadow in the pillar. It looked almost like a person, but as soon as it appeared, it vanished. The traveler kept his eye on the Iceman who stood in the mouth of the cave, unmoving. When the Iceman took a step further in the cave, the voices suddenly stopped. The traveler watched as shadowy figures continued to multiply the closer the Iceman came to the pillars. The traveler backed up near the mouth of the cave, horrified at what he was seeing. Quietly, he whispered, "What is happening?" As if pulled out of a trance, the Iceman turned to the traveler and said, "I finally understand. This is where I came from. A few years ago, I was just like them. From your perspective, a shadow living in the ice. When, without warning, I was cast out and forced into this world. Living in that ice makes this world extremely difficult to see. So for a while, I was lost to them. Until the day my power exploded out of me. Even here, far up in this cave, they could feel my power and they knew it came from the one they had lost. That's when they started calling out to me. But in my grief and self-loathing, I could not hear them. Until you came along." The Iceman took a long look at the pillars, then smiled. "You helped me hear their call. You helped bring me here, back to where I belong. And now, it's time to rejoin my kin." Turning to the traveler, he said, "Thank you for freeing me and bringing me back to my people." The Iceman touched a pillar, and in a blink, he was gone. All the shadows suddenly vanished, except for one. The shadowy figure waved before suddenly disappearing with the rest, leaving the ice pillar clear again. The traveler stood there, shocked. He didn't move for a while, trying to process the events that had just occurred. After a few long minutes, he walked up to one of the pillars. Laying his hand on it, he said, "It is sad to see your story in this world end,
but I am glad that you were able to find your way in the end."
After these words, the traveler stepped out of the cave and looked over the vast land laid out in front of him.
"Who needs my guidance next?"
he asked as he closed his eyes. Taking a second, he listened to the world around him. Opening his eyes, he said,
"I see. My journey will now take me west. Let's see who else has lost their way."
By the end of the story, the fire Thaddeus and his party constructed had almost died out. The cold night air made the dead earth around them feel eerie and evil, and the fire dying only heightened that feeling. The forest they passed through still had its eyes on them. Although the party could see no one in the tree line, they could feel the ever-present eyes. This land still held dark secrets, and the party could feel its desire to rid the land of their presence. The story hadn't helped ease their tension, but it did at least pass the time. Finding no relief, the party sat around their small fire in silence. No one wanted to sleep. Together they were strong, but who knew what would happen if any of them slept and let the evil of this land run unchecked? Feeling uncomfortable in the silence, Lyra spoke up.
"Thank you for the story, but do you not find it weird that the character from the story the traveler told had the same name as you, Thaddeus?"
"I never thought about that until today. This story has been passed down in my family for many generations. Now that I think about it, many friends from my youth did joke that the Thaddeus in the story was me, or that I was named after him. But telling it now made me realize that even you all are mentioned in the story." Thaddeus shifted uneasily, feeling both curiosity and terror about his story. "Do you think that the story could actually be about us?" "No, that's impossible," Rowan said with a strange level of confidence.
"Are you sure?"
Sarah said.
"I have heard it said that some of our ancestors were able to predict the future. It was said that they would occasionally have revelations about events that had not yet occurred. This story could have come from one of those people."
"If that were, then why do we not see this today? We have been all over the world, met people of every culture, but have never heard of anyone able to see the future. It's just by chance that the story mentions us. The person who wrote it probably thought our names were good names."
"I hope you're right, Rowan,"
Lyra said, feeling very uneasy. That night, no one slept. Even Rowan felt worried about their names appearing in the story. And with the inhospitable land around them, they were unable to get comfortable and unable to get the story out of their minds. As the sun rose over the barren land, the party began their journey to the center of the Dark King's land, where his castle sat. Thank you for listening to The Voice of Adventure. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to follow wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also keep up with the stories and see extra content on Instagram at Josiah the Author. Be sure to tune in next month as we finish Thaddeus and his party's adventure through the Dark King's land. See you in the next story.